Grognards, episode 3. Welcome to the Grognards of Gaming. It's the only podcast that gives you what you want, the way you want it, as long as what you want is two old guys just talking about their gaming memories and what's still cool, I guess. But I'm Phil, and now speaking of what's still cool, I'm joined by my partner in crime. Go ahead and introduce yourself, my friend.
Rob the Grognard dog.
Rob the Grognard dog. I looked at his face a minute there. I thought, is he going to say it? He's going to say it. He said it. That's right, the Grognard dog.
I said
now, notice the different pronunciations. We still haven't picked one, so we have our own. Grognard, Grognard. If you're out there listening, let us know, like via Psychic Facts, and we'll get your message. At any rate,
yeah, I say tomato. You say tomato. You say potato. I say potato.
I say potato. I want to sing that, by the way, in Christopher Walken's voice, because there actually was an SNL skit where he goes, "You're killing me with this." You know, he's like, "Potato." I don't know. I don't know. I won't do it now, but you get the general idea.
You can do anything in Christopher Walken's voice. I love it. I love Christopher Walken impersonations. I totally love
it. It's
wow.
Potato. I don't know. Sounds good. What do you think? Totally, my red. That should be a genre. It's just Christopher Walken movies. But today, though, Rob, you and I wanted to get into our favorite genres, and one of the reasons why we wanted to do that, we had a couple of different reasons. Last episode, as you remember, we talked about our favorite gaming systems, and we made a couple points there, and I think that it's still true of a lot of role-playing games we see nowadays, but definitely the big hits. They have the genre kind of wrapped up with the rules. You don't feel that you can separate the genre from the rules all the time. And then we talked last episode very, I think, ebulliently about the fate system and how you can translate that. So if you remember, you and I talked about, I think we got to talk about genres as a separate package from the systems, lest we not get to the good stuff, or lest we forget there's some good stuff there with genres. So anyway, I know you've been thinking all day about your top 5. I've been thinking some of the day about it, but since you seem like you've got a lot on your mind, I want to hear what you have to say. Why don't you kick us off today's episode with your top favorite genre, or you could do what you did last time and start from the bottom. Your choice. What are your favorite genres?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to give you a word point for ebullient. That I always love hearing ebullient.
That's my 10th. That's
and as we used to say, 1,000 word points gets you 1 experience point. So
that's right. I got like 53, like over the years, but I'm like nowhere close to 1,000.
So I think we'll use the same format that we did last time, where we do like the high fidelity John Cusack top 5. Let's do that.
Yes.
This time, however, I'm gonna do it David Letterman style, and I'm gonna start with 5, and then work my way up to 1. 1 being my favorite. Okay.
Cool.
So,
cool.
Shall I think maybe we'll popcorn back and forth. I'll say my 5, and then we'll discuss it, and maybe you could say your 5 or something. We could do something. Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, in that case, I think that for me, my number 5 favorite role-playing game setting is sword and sorcery. And especially for me, I like dark sword and sorcery. I'm talking about like the dying sun subgenre of sword and sorcery, where it's sort of like the end of that world's life, and maybe either things have reverted back to a medieval paradigm, or perhaps it's always been a medieval paradigm. And this is done very well by Wizards of the Coast's Dark Sun setting, and also in literature by Clark Ashton Smith's Zothique setting. So I love sword and sorcery in general, and I think that any gamer, especially any Grognard who came into the game through Dungeons and Dragons or one of the other similar games, will always have a place in their hearts for sword and sorcery. What do you think?
Absolutely, I think that that's how we know a lot of role playing That's how I think the everyday person would know role playing. I think if you said swords and magic, that's very translatable. It's translatable also because I think a lot of young people, with the advent of Harry Potter and that kind of thing, the idea of a wizard either in medieval or modern day is very. I mean, it's again very accessible idea. And then who doesn't love the idea of a medieval knight and what the men at arms would do and the soldiering. So sword and sorcery just puts those two things together. I think also it's very portable to the imaginations of people that are steeped in some of the science fiction writers, some of the fantasy writers, one that you mentioned. But if you like anything of the fantasy genre, you're going to be thinking sword and sorcery, all the time. So I think it's also translatable to multiple worlds. Like you could, I mean, how many fantasy maps have you seen? Like in fact, I'm looking at one right now on my wall that's from a wonderful artist, and he just made a map of a thing that I don't even think there's a game attached. He just did a map.
Wow.
It's Jared Blando. He's a wonderful map artist, wonderful cartographer. And I won't put it in my screen right now, but I'm looking at it up here, and I don't know where these places are. They're far off places, but I could completely imagine a wizard or a lonely fighter looking for coin traveling those lands. So yeah, I totally agree with your sword and sorcery, 100%. Just to riff off of that a little bit, my translation of what you said, I never didn't like the sword and sorcery. But for me, whenever I go sword and sorcery, because of my particular experiences, I think of Ars Magica, which of course we talked about in the last podcast. And among that, I think, Mythic Europe. But one thing I had on my list that I actually took off, it actually did not make my top 5, was Ars Magica translated in the year 1515, which I had a couple of games with. It was with Sandy, our friend Sandy, and his group. And it was really interesting to bring in a very late medieval and like Renaissance era, so that sword and sorcery translated to something more Renaissance was really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that's high praise about your friend's map coming from you, because I think that of all of the role playing game map makers I've ever seen, you're one of the best. I mean, you just make beautiful maps. And
thank you. Yeah.
And I've tried to copy your style in making maps for other games. I don't even come close. So yeah, you have a particular talent for that. And and I think that part of that stems from your being a medievalist, or at least if not a professional medievalist, just sort of a hobbyist. I think that influences your artistic style. So it fits perfectly for sword and sorcery games. All right, well that's great. So what about you? What's your number 5?
Number 5 is, so by the way, a couple of these are qualified by saying it doesn't mean, when I thought about genre today, it didn't mean that I actually had a lot of role-playing experience. It's the ones that I admired the most, even if I didn't actually have years of role-playing. Because we did cover that last episode, I think, pretty well. Number 5 is Modern Vampires. And I really always liked the White world. I always like the World of Darkness world. We talked about that. And then that's actually your comments in the last episode made me think about the World of Darkness and the different interlinked types of creatures you could be. And then I thought to myself, well, Phil, what among if you're going to pick one, what would you pick? And I know you had some good experiences with Changeling, I think, and Wraith, I think, in your role-playing past. I never quite got there. I got a lot to Vampire the Masquerade, but I only played a couple of stray sessions, just random pickups of the actual role-playing game. Most of my experience in Modern Vampires was through the Jihad card game that, if you remember, I played a lot with Chris in New York and some of our friends. And that game has stayed with me over the years, and there's definitely a reason. They had done a perfect infusion for me of the romance of the vampire without, and forgive me for this, without going down the sparkly way of vampires. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Not the Twilight kind. Yet they picked out the powers and the effects, and then they had quotes from music and stuff and poetry. That set of cards is still powerful to me. So I thought to myself, dude, you got to put that on your genre list. So Modern Vampires was my number 5.
Yeah, their core role playing book, Vampire the Masquerade, also did that with quotes, and they did a really great job of building the atmosphere. And I think that it was Anne Rice's interview with the vampire that really kind of
Yes.
sparked the
Yes.
that role playing genre. That
Yes.
that was wonderful. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that might be like that might be the urban arcana genre might be the bridge between my number 5 and my number 4.
Cool.
So
Cool.
yeah,
That's cool.
okay. So my number 4 is the modern action hero genre. I
Oh, yes.
love the modern
Ah,
action
yes.
hero genre, and
Yes,
when I
do.
when I say the modern action hero genre, I'm talking about doing things like Die Hard with Bruce Willis, that kind of stuff, or cops, or villain, crime story villains or something like that. And that I'm running a game with my friend Paul, and we're playing in 1960s Las Vegas, a crime story. So that's really an anti-hero, but that I consider that modern. And then I may have mentioned in our last podcast that I did a 1970s mod action hero game, and that was just so much fun.
Yes, you did.
Modeled after the
That
Mod
sounds so
Squad,
great. Yeah.
Starsky and Hutch, yeah, all those kind of things. So I consider anything like mid 20th century to the present to be modern. And you and I and Peter and Chris, we very recently did a sort of a version of the modern action hero. Why don't you want to talk about that before you tell us?
No, I want you to flow it. Yeah. And
So
I'll say a couple things afterwards. Yeah.
So Peter and Chris and you and I, we were the gaming group in New York that we keep referencing, and we played your magnificent Ars Magica campaign. And then after our 20s were over, we all started to go our separate ways. We were all going back to our respective cities. Peter went back to Seattle. I think Chris followed him there. And I went back to Philadelphia, and you went back to Michigan, and these were the days before Zoom and really before Skype was.
Yeah.
So it was like that was it. Like we loved each other, we kept in touch, but we couldn't game anymore. But then the shutdown came from the COVID shutdown, and everybody in the world was forced to get used to Zooming, and then we started. We were like, hey. We could get the band back together again.
Exactly. Yeah.
And game over Zoom. So we literally got the band back together again, and we
so much fun.
Figuratively got the band back together again because it's kind of bad. So I said to you guys, I want to run a Fate game for you guys. What do you want? Throw some genres at me, and each of you threw like 3 genres at me. And the one that really I think I put at the top of the list was Chris's idea of a modern urban arcana game where everybody plays bards. And I was like, I've never done that before. And he was specifically suggested like we play a rock and roll band. I was like, you know what, dude, let's totally do that.
Yeah.
So we did, and I ran the game, and I don't know if you noticed this, and I don't know if Peter or Chris noticed this, but the game I ran was basically the movie Still Crazy.
No, I don't think I saw that movie.
You know what?
I don't think I caught it. Oh, yeah.
Just take your headphones off, walk away. I'll do the rest of the show alone. Just go watch Still Crazy.
Okay.
So it's from it's from the people that brought you the Full Monty and a lot of the same actors, like that British crowd.
I'm gonna write this down.
It's Still Crazy. Like it's like the Paul Simon song, Still Crazy After All These Years.
Oh, sure,
but they don't.
Sure.
But they're like a 1970s rock group called Strange Fruit, and the movie takes place in the 1990s when everybody was getting that like nostalgia wave for the 70s bands, and it's like. Right. It's like one of the band members is who I think is modeled after Tony Banks from Genesis. He's like, we should ride this nostalgia wave and get the band back together again. And he goes and he one by one he collects the members of the band, and that's a whole scene and adventure.
Oh, that's
and then
fantastic.
they get together and practice, and that's a whole scene and adventure. And then they go on tour, and that's a couple of scenes and adventures. And it's one of the funniest, best, beautiful, most sentimental movies you'll ever see, and I love it. It's one of my favorite movies. And so that's why Chris's idea of playing a rock band like struck a chord, and I was like, I'm just going to run that movie, but I'm going to let Phil and Chris and Pete like really let them take it in the direction it goes.
Yeah.
And dude, and you'll see, like the NPC that I played, the former roadie gopher girl who later on becomes their manager when they get together again. That NPC is straight out of the movie, and you'll see like each of your characters kind of are kind of an analog of the characters in the movie.
Wow.
It's wonderful. Yeah, so it fit
I never
perfectly.
caught that. That's a huge like new dimension now to what we did. That's awesome.
And to me, that's a modern action hero game. So okay, you either give us your thoughts about the rock and roll game, or tell us whenever you're ready, tell us your number 4.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say about the rock and roll one. It actually bleeds a little bit into my number 4. It actually was a little bit of a segue. And here's the link here. What I really enjoyed about that, I enjoyed a couple of things about it. Not least because it was fake, because we covered that last episode, but I think that was so portable and so easy to do over Zoom that I remember being slightly skeptical, but then as soon as we got into it, I was like, no, this is awesome. I need it. In fact, one of the first things I thought about when you talked about it was something I know I want to cover in a later episode, which is the role of role-playing game in mental health and what it has done for me and you, and I think many of our friends, and why we need it. It's not really... I used to think to myself, oh, someday I'll grow up out of it. I've never grown out of it. And I realized it plays a role in my life. And we needed it, and we needed each other at that time, because that was a very, very, very difficult time. But my friend, who did we go to? Who was our go-tos? Each other. And so role-playing just gave us a thing to do while we were together. We could have just sat back with coffee and chatted too. But because we were engaged in this particular story that you had set up and the cool genre, thinking about different characters, there was some purpose. I remember, and I'm sure people out there remember, there's a couple of times it was hard to get up out of bed. It was really hard. But I remember like going, no, man, like I've got this and many other things to look forward to, certainly too. But like this really was something that got me out of bed. So that was the first thing I remember about the rock band genre. But what I also enjoyed, I thought was a kind of a fun touch and an unexpected one, is that you had said, you can do a traditional like D&D race. You don't have to be human. So like Peter was like a Sheed elf, right? He was what we would think of as a Tolkienian elf, but we call them a Sheed from the fairies, And I got to be like a dwarven dude, and of course I styled him after Murderface from Deathclock. So that was really awesome. Yes, right. It's all about being professional. And he was like the roadie, and he was like the bass guy. I'm the ugly one. I'm just ugly. So I really enjoyed that. But the cool thing was to get a hook in my mind for the genre itself. I went to the Shadowrun or Cyberpunk world. So that's my number 4. Is a dark future. I always liked the dark future. I remember even, and this, I'm going to throw this in the same category because it is a different game, but it's the same category. I really enjoyed the world of Car Wars. So there's actually a world around the Steve Jackson game Car Wars, which is ostensibly just about you making, you spending 2 hours to design a very expensive vehicle that then it gets smashed in 10 seconds of arena time, but then like an hour of resolution time between you and your friend. And I remember playing this a lot as a teenager, and we, of course, had the little cutouts, and we'd have the grid, right? But there was a series of magazines that Steve Jackson did called Auto Duel, which actually detailed more of the world that was kind of a Mad Max world, but with a little bit more tech than Mad Max had. So I like Dark Future. I like Mad Max. I like this Auto Duel. But I think I put the one I put for number 4 was Cyberpunk / Shadowrun. the thing I like about both of them is that dark future, that high tech. I like the high tech rather than what we call the chassis and crossbow low tech. This would be like the high tech world, computer hackers. There's also a really great card game. So I mentioned Jihad and how I kind of like learned about the modern day vampires from Jihad. I remember also playing a game called Netrunner, and there's a new version of Netrunner, which, believe it or not, this old guy doesn't like as much as his tried and true old 90s version. But at any rate, so there's a game called Netrunner that is based in the cyberpunk world. And you basically access a computer and you romp through it looking for, like agendas and like something that's of value to the corp, and you're stealing from the corp. So I like that dark streets at night, kind of, running with guns, cover your guy while he's, jacking into the bank. He steals 5,000 creds and off you go into the night. Shadowrun does all of that and then a bit more because it also has magic and those races. So it really was cool because we were playing what I saw. I mean, Chris was a half orc. And like you can be a half orc you can be an orc character in Shadowrun, which is pretty cool, right? So I really enjoyed the Rock Band because it also took from my number 4, which is Cyberpunk / Shadowrun. It was pretty cool. I always liked that genre, but you brought a dimension of that in, which I was like, again, Fate can do all this stuff, but when we get together, we got some really cool stuff. Yeah. So,
we do. So to add to your list of movies to watch, right under Still Crazy, I would recommend, if you haven't seen it already, the original Death Race 2000 from the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. That's right in line with Car Wars. In fact, I would not be surprised if, aside from the name of the game, which obviously was inspired by Star Wars, if the setting itself wasn't inspired by Death Race 2000. And if there are any listeners out there who share Phil's passion for this sort of genre, I recommend a game called Paranoia. Actually, let me take that back.
Oh yeah.
I don't recommend it because I've never played it, so I don't know if I can't fairly say I recommend it. But I do know that game is out there, and from what I know, it sounds like a really cool setting, and it would definitely be something I would like to play. So there's Paranoia. That fits right in. All right. So these are very small steps from your number 4 to my number 3. My number 3 is science fiction, particularly, and you guessed this last time, Star Frontiers and Bulldogs. So Star Frontiers was TSR's, Bulldogs. So, and we know the developer of Bulldogs personally. So, or maybe you don't know him, but I know him personally.
I don't know. Who is he?
Oh yeah. Okay. So let me first talk about Star Frontiers. Star Frontiers was TSR's version of a science fiction game, and it was probably somewhere between science fiction and space fantasy, although I think it leaned more towards science fiction than anything else. And Bulldogs was I'm having an elder moment. I'm forgetting the gentleman's name, but he is a friend of the other New York gaming group that we used to game with, Jason and Michelle and John and John and all those guys. So this fellow is friends of theirs, and I've gamed with him. I've been out with him. I'm blanking on his name, but he is one of the developers of Bulldogs, and. It'll come to me later. And Bulldogs was kind of like Star Frontiers, a little bit more expanded. They had they had, for example, an Ewok race in there, but they were truer to if there really were Ewoks, because Ewoks are cannibalistic, they'd be like really nasty little critters. And so
they would be.
Yeah. And so Bulldogs was just all right, let's just own the nastiness, So they made these little teddy bear aliens that were really nasty. They had human beings, but basically any near human would fall into the human being category. And they had all different kinds of races. There were probably double or triple the number of races that Star Frontiers had. But Star Frontiers had really cool races. I mean, an insectoid race, which was the Vrusk. They had sort of a flying monkey race, which was the Yazirian. But But you and I, and the human, of course, but you and I, our favorite is, of course, the Dralizite, right? I mean, we love
I
Dralizites.
love the Dralicytes. They're like walking amoebas. They're
Walking
great.
amoebas, yeah,
Who wouldn't like
protoplasmic.
that?
They're awesome. They're kind of shape
Right?
changey, and they're awesome. So I just thought that was a really inventive and original science fiction setting, and I thought that Bulldogs really carried the torch very well from Star Frontiers. So any science fiction setting, I would put as number 3. But at the top of all of the lists of science fiction settings, I would say Star Frontiers and Bulldogs. And one of the things I like about Star Frontiers is it's high action. It's high action.
Yep.
It's you can do cyberpunk in it. As a matter of fact, I just picked one of the core worlds in the setting, and I just decided I'm going to just make that a cyberpunk world. And so I infused that into the setting and baked it in. And what I like is that Star Frontiers and Bulldogs are not focused on the sci so much. They're more on the high action fi, and they're not focused so much on like social science fiction like Star Trek might be. They're really they're more high action. Yeah. They're more high action.
Interaction of the people. Yeah.
Right. I think they're more. All right. Maybe I shouldn't say this because it might turn some listeners off. But it's more like the J.J. Abrams version of Star Trek, where it's not so much cerebral. It's more like jumping and daring do in space and. Yeah. Now, maybe you didn't like J.J. Abrams' version of Star Trek, and I prefer the original Star Trek because when you go into watching Star Trek, you're looking for social science fiction. But when I'm looking to a role-playing game in a science fiction setting, I prefer to do a high-action daring do, and so there you have it. All right, so popcorn to you. What do you think about that, and what's your number 3?
Well, I did play. I was going to say I'm not really familiar with Bulldogs, although I was trying to look up the guy's name and I don't see it. Oh, is it Brennan Taylor?
That's it.
Does that make sense?
Brennan.
Good.
Oh, Brennan. Listen, Brennan. I'm so sorry that I blanked on your name, but I'm getting old, and I'm also drinking. Okay. I'm also drinking gin. I mean water. Yeah. So my memories get a little fuzzy. I'm sorry, Brennan. Yeah, Brennan. He's an awesome dude. I love Brennan. Really nice guy and a great game developer.
Yeah, that's cool. It's cool you're able to play with them a little bit too, or play some games with them. That's really kind of a cool memory. But I did play Star Frontiers, and I did play Star Frontiers when I was younger. Let's say 15, 16. I had a neighborhood friend, the same person, my friend Eric, who played a lot of that Middle Earth role playing with me. Oh, yeah. We also had Star Frontiers. In fact, I know I texted you a picture of Star Frontiers book like a couple months ago, and you're like, "Hey, remember that?" Because I knew you'd know, right? And I actually like Star Frontiers a lot because I remember looking at some of its maps. It came with some map, some. I was the kind of jam that I did like. I like maps. You mentioned maps, so I liked taking out the map and thinking about it, and then I did like planning, but visual. I mean, to this day, I do visual artwork and stuff like that. So it's no crazy leap of logic to know that as a 15-year-old, I loved the visual value of things. But I really did. They had Larry Elmore's art for a lot of that, and that was just awesome and stunning and kind of otherworldly. Yeah. So you couldn't help but to like it, even if some of the we talked last time about how some of the system was a little clunky, but you couldn't not like it. There's the Needler and the Sonic Disruptor, and just it was really the stuff of fantasy novel covers too. I think Frank Frazetta, that kind of stuff. Like, oh man, it was just out there, and it freed you. That kind of stuff really frees you as an escape. I mean, this is kind of why we role play too, right? But it really got your mind thinking in ways that you're like, holy shit, this is really cool. So no, I have only good things to say about Star Frontiers, and I did play about, I want to say 6 to 7 times in my life, and they were always enjoyable. But being a younger guy, like some of our stories are kind of like simplistic, but we didn't care, Yeah. But it was great, Yeah. So working up the list, and I said this, and you know this about me. No surprise what's going to be number 3, but it only made it number 3, which I thought was interesting as I thought about this. is Middle Earth, of course, as a genre. But I have a very specific Middle Earth. So I've tried games in like Second Age, different times in First Age, or different times in the Third Age, and because I'm a kind of a student of Tolkien, and I'm also like very familiar with the Iron Crown Enterprises work, which is again an encyclopedic work of Tolkien translated to the role playing. Even if you don't like the fact that Middle Earth role playing is basically a watered down Rollmaster with a table upon table of table, if that's not your style, you still really can't say much negative about all of the research they did, which, as I said in the previous episode, is indistinguishable at some points from Tolkien's actual canon.
Yes.
You will be like, holy crap, this is stuff. And you've seen it because you know this because you had done a Fate Middle Earth, which I thought was a lot of fun. I had a great time doing it. And I remember one time I flew out to see you, and you and I went to a little gaming store, with an open play, and you taught me how to run Fate. Like it was like a caring dad with a kid with training wheels, and you're like, it's okay, Phil, you can do it. Here's how an aspect works. You're doing it. I'm pedaling. I'm like, I'm GMing, Dad. I'm GMing, and you're like, that's my little dude. Like, you tutored me how to do things, right? He's so proud of me.
I was so proud of you.
Remember, I had to take breaks every 45 minutes. I'm like, Rob, am I doing this right? It was like you and me, like looking over at us, and like people looking over, like, what's going on? Like you're holding my hand. Like, it's really weird. Yeah, we had some beers. It was great.
We did. It was awesome.
I learned how you taught me how to play Fate because I said I want to go back. I love Fate so much. I want to go ahead and introduce my friends. Which, by the way, not too long after that little scene in your local gaming area, I introduced Fate to a group of my friends and with a very specific, interesting intent. Because you also know I'm a big board gamer, so I'm going to go off a little bit. I'm going to get back to my Middle Earth in a minute, but because of that specific memory and you like lovingly working me through the Fate system, and we did a little Middle Earth because I knew Middle Earth pretty well, so I wanted to look out what I knew. What I decided to do with Fate, and unfortunately, it was close enough to the pandemic that I couldn't really make good on a lot of the Fate work we had done because it kind of shut down, which is another reason why I'm glad we did find each other on Zoom in Fate, using the Fate system. But at any rate, I went home and I introduced it to a small group I had, and I said, well, I love board games, and I love playing board games with you, but there are many board games that we all like, which bespeak a world around them. Not all board games can do this. There's no world of code names. There's no real world of, like Catan has a world, but you wonder what's on the other continents outside of Catan, those kinds of things. But some games just don't have a translatable world. They may be abstract games. They might be like dice games, whatever. But there are many games that actually you're like, wait a minute, this board game is really cool, but what's the outside world around the board game like, right? So one of them is Root. So Root is this board game by Later Games. It's very popular. It's anthropomorphic animals, forest animals beating up each other. It's really hilarious, right? But it live in this place called the Woodland Realm. It's almost like a children's book gone mad in a way because you have like the cat, you have like the Marquis de Cat, who is like, she's like a terrible, like an overlord ruler. You got the Eagles dynasty who are trying to like take her over. And then you've got the brave like rebels, the Woodland Alliance, who are like the foxes and the mice and rabbits, and they band together. And then you've got this guy called the Vagabond, who can be another player could be a vagabond. And he's like a raccoon that just has special rules of movement and fighting. He can walk around, do anything he wants. But you got to be careful because if you're not looking, the vagabond will win and beat everybody else. But
swipe or no swiping.
Exactly. Yeah. He totally looks like from Dora, right? But the cards, the movements, the rules, the map itself, it all is this beautiful world, and It's amazingly illustrated. And so when you play Root, you're like, I don't want to just play the board game. I want to role play in Root.
Wow.
So that's one example of 5. I actually pulled out 4 other games, and I set them in front of my friends. They all came in, and I ushered them into my, ceremoniously into my back, like game area. And I was like, all right, I put before you 5 games I've at least introduced you. Which of these would you like to role play? And they're like, they realized at the moment I wasn't asking them to play over for a board game. They're like, wait a minute, role play? Like, I would like to use, I was like, the Fate system to role play any of the genres that stem out of the board games that you all like. One of them, by the way, was another one was Down with the King, which is that game I think I remember introducing you to. I'm not sure if you remember this, but it's an Avalon Hill game that's set in a mythical Elizabethan court.
Oh wow!
But you could play like nobles, and they could go on adventures and on ships and stuff. That could be pirates, and I don't know, it could be like a genre, right? So I was like, let me tell you, this is kind of like a fun, democratic way to choose. And so what they did was they almost unanimously they chose Root because they were all in love with Root. Anywho,
wow. Was one of the other games the Settlers of Catan or Spacefarers of Catan?
No.
No.
One of the other games. No. I can tell you if I can remember this correctly. One of the games was, believe it or not, Race for the Galaxy, and it's a card game that is like about exploration and building your trade up in the universe. And I thought to myself, if they pick this one, we're going to do like space opera.
Yeah.
But it's going to use the planets and stuff that are in the card game.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I'll be actually true to the freaking card game. It would be kind of fun, you know?
Yeah. Go ahead. Was one of the games Theophraxis?
No, it was not. It was not my published title from.
And who published that game?
Theophraxis was published by Mayfair Games, the same people that made Catan.
That's a huge deal.
I appreciate that.
Our listeners should know that you are a published board game designer with Avalon Hill. Mayfair Games. Excuse me, Mayfair Games. And you
out of print, but
you published 2 games.
6 total.
6 games. Mm-hmm. Maron, I lost track.
Yep. So
tell our listeners the 6 games you published.
Oh, do you really want? Should we
do
this? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Real fast.
I don't know. All right,
real fast.
My first game was because I got to get back to the Middle Earth genre.
Yeah, anyway, we'll get back to it.
My first game was Theophraxis published by Mayfair Games. Funny story. I might tell a different podcast, but not this one. We'll just save it.
Okay.
But it's a game of medieval alchemy. And I thought to myself, you should be able to make. Oh, by the way, this is actually a role-playing game. This has a root in role-playing games because it was our friend Jonathan's character that inspired the board game. Jonathan's character from Ars Magic, if you remember, was an alchemist.
Yeah.
And we couldn't really handle there was no like rules for alchemy in Ars Magica. It was just like a general skill, and we're like, no, it should be more developed than that. And I remember on a stalled subway train in New York City, I started thinking about our Ars Magica game. My brain went to Jonathan's character. I thought about some of the rules that I wanted to introduce the next Sunday when we played. And then I thought to myself, wouldn't it be really great if there's like a quick way to do this by cards? And that's actually how the game got created in my mind. It was from a character.
Does Jonathan know that?
No, I would never tell him.
I think
he does. Yeah, no, I'm joking. Yeah, he's like, wow, cool. Yeah, I got it.
That's really cool.
No, yeah. But the second game, I'm messing with you. I couldn't help it. You're like really drawn in. I was like, all right. No, but the second game is based on Ars Magica. It's called Grand Tribunal, and it's a board game that's kind of like a magic item science fair among wizards, but it's specifically set in Ars Magica because I want to do some homage to my roots, man. You got that, right?
Yeah.
The third one is actually an abstract game called Gemstones, and it's actually made by a puzzle company who does a lot of woodwork, and they actually broke into like plastic tile work for this. And it's an abstract game where you move like different colored gems, but you can also move the board so that you can make rows of gems, which you can then collect. It's kind of fun.
Whoa!
And I literally made that game by staring down at the floor while I was in the bathroom at one of the stalls at my work, and it was hexagons. I was like, you know what? I love hexagons. I need to do some with hexagons. That's actually how I came with the game, like literally in the bathroom.
Sometimes the crapper is like, it's the best place for ideas.
You never know, right. And the fourth one is a game called Arcadia. I made it with my friend Greg Bush. It is a game that originally started also as an homage to Ars Magica when we went to Fairyland with your character, actually. but it was about recruiting different fairy races to make different castles and buildings in fairyland. It got translated, not, and it wasn't, I don't have a problem with the translation, that it actually sold. If it sold, I don't care. But it got translated to players creating their ideal amusement park. It's called Arcadia, but they kept the name Arcadia because they loved that name for an amusement park. Okay. So that was fun. My fifth one is actually, my fifth and sixth one is both with a wonderful, fantastic kids game company called Simply Fun. They're out of Washington State. And they have beautiful kids games. People check them out. They're awesome. Simplyfun.com. They're just fantastic. And I sold them a game that was called, it wasn't called this at the time, but they translated it, if you will. They translated the genre. It's called Digger's Garden Match, and it's a game for kids with rotational geometry on hexagons to match colors and shapes for points, and it features a dog that everyone thought was my dog at the time. I don't know if you remember Jake. He was my Beagle Bass at the time. That was a complete coincidence, but they also have like a plush doll that looks like my old dogs. It's kind of cute. And a couple years, right before the pandemic hit, I sold them the sequel called Digger's Backyard, where kids have to cooperate to move Digger, the dog Digger, so that he can dig up all of his lost toys in his backyard before the parents come home. So it's a cooperative game because I believe very deeply in helping kids understand how to work with each other.
Yeah.
And they love that idea. And then the shutdown hit, and they said, Phil, we're really sorry, but we do still want to make it. We're just going to make it someday. I'm like, hey man, I'm not going anywhere. And I was working for the Department of Ed. I'm good, right? So I got a message. I think this is June of this year or July. I got a message, and I finally saw the box front and back, and the rules, and they let me like take a look, look through it. And so it's in progress right now. So as soon as it comes, who knows? It might actually come out while we're doing some of our episodes here, and then we'll talk about it. But I do appreciate that little bird walk about my board games. Thank you. That's very nice. But back to Middle Earth and my number 3 genre here, because some of the stuff, and you can probably already tell, I'm sure our listeners can tell, that a lot of our life is organic, and we pluck ideas out of other things, and some things are unlooked for, right? So, Theophrastus coming out of Jonathan's character because of alchemy is kind of cool, but it's also a little not surprising because it's all jumbling around my head. It just means like the peanut butter and jelly got together on the bread at the right time. Like the two neurons went, okay, So with Middle Earth, I did kind of do some experimentation over my years of playing Middle Earth role-playing. I am playing One Ring as well. I've played that last year, which is it stands up. It's a really great role-playing system. I do recommend it. But it has, One Ring has a very set time frame. Middle Earth role-playing, I realized, was kind of like an Ars Magica in that you could set it in any time period of Middle Earth. So I experimented with quite a few. Numenor was another. I mean, the fact that Rings of Power is set in Numenor, I'm like, I love that, right?
Oh, yeah.
But specifically Middle Earth from the Third Age, from 2931 to 2941. So it's 10 years, the decade before Gandalf taps Bilbo to go with the dwarves. And at this point, you have a very young Aragorn who's in Rivendell. He's actually 10 in 2941. He lives in Rivendell. Nobody knows that, but if you go back through like the timeline, he actually lives in Rivendell as a young kid. So in 2931 to 2941, Middle Earth is, it hasn't seen war in a long time. And the whole opening scene of the Peter Jackson books where, history became myth, myth became legend. Exactly. Yeah. Done. Yeah, thank you for just playing that. But yeah, exactly. That's the 10 years right before the book The Hobbit. And the reason why I felt that's always served me as a genre for Middle Earth is because a lot of the world we know from The Hobbit is there. But none of the urgency is there yet. And you can kind of really mess around with the shapes and shadows of the dark. Maybe an orc is spotted here, a troll is spotted there, but you know what? People are beginning to worry, but other people are like, no, I'm sure that's nothing. And then you can kind of build a lot of mystery with that. So again, my number 3 is Middle Earth from 2931 to 2941, right before The Hobbit. You
that's
got
awesome.
a goblet there.
And
Now, is that filled with
I
candy
do it.
too, or?
Well, I'll tell you in a minute. But like you were just saying, like you could have an orc here and there and a goblin here and there. But that was like the necromancer, right? That when Sauron was reforming as this mysterious necromancer. That's a great time. So yeah, I have two glass goblets. One of Gandalf and one of Frodo that I got from Burger King when the Lord of the Rings movies came out. But the best part is, and I don't know if you could see it, it says Lord of the Rings on one side, and on the other side, I put the wrong goblet in the wrong box. This is Gandalf. But on the bottom is a switch, and when you flick the switch, I don't know if you could see it, but it lights up.
Yeah,
it lights fantastic. Up. This one doesn't light up as much as the other one. Maybe this one might be a little more dramatic.
Kind of like a cool, like dramatic color to your drink.
That's right. And here's the Frodo one. I think this will be more dramatic. Here we go. Ready? Yeah, there you go.
That's fantastic.
That really lights up. Yeah. And when it's full of liquid, it refracts the light all throughout the liquid.
That's awesome.
And so I'm running right now a Fate game, like an Urban Arcana child detective game, and
cool.
And one of the characters plays a little girl who has delusions of grandeur. She imagines herself like the queen fairy of the realm, and she gets all the kids in the neighborhood together as her subjects. And I wrote a jingle for a commercial for a Burger King like franchise called Burgermeister, and maybe someday I'll sing the jingle for you. And sure. And I composed this whole commercial, and I narrated the whole commercial. And then at the end of the commercial, they Burgermeister advertised their Burgermeister goblets free with every Burgermeister Meister meal. And so I pulled these out and gave them to the players. And now every time we play this game, they've got their Burgermeister Meister goblets, and they actually play an important role in the game. It's the way the changeling character enchants the other mortal characters so that they can see into the fairy realm. But yeah, I mean, all of these sword sorcery things are inspired by Lord of the Rings. I mean, not that Lord of the Rings was the first, but it really, I think, took the sword and sorcery genre to the next level and just made it really a beautiful piece of art that was really worth inspiring. That really inspired a lot of other genres. Yeah, so that's right. While it didn't make my top 5, it definitely gets honorable mention for me. Lord of the Rings. All right, so my number 2 is pulp. And when I say pulp, I mean like specifically the two-fisted everyman hero kind of pulp. Which
you've played that for many years. Yes,
I love it. And if there's magic in the world, it's kind of like Eastern mysticism or maybe seances. It usually takes place in the 1930s or 40s, or 20s. It could be 20s. That's I love pulp, and one of the reasons I love pulp so much is because. You don't have to be a star, baby, to be in my show. You don't have to be Superman. You don't have to be a Jedi Knight. You don't have to be but you can just be like an everyman, but you're inspired to be heroic. And I love that about pulp. So now I also like the sort of 1920s, 1930s masked Avenger type pulp. And superheroes didn't make my top 5, and I'm not even sure I would put. I'm not even sure I'd put superheroes in my honorable mentions. But masked Avengers, I think I would put that in like my honorable mention. But yeah, that's my number 2.
That's awesome.
What are your thoughts about pulp, and what's your number 2?
Well, I've enjoyed pulp through you. Like I've enjoyed your relaying of the games. I know you played a bunch of pulp when you were playing with the Queen's group. And I remember kind of living through you, a lot of your characters. One of you, I don't know if it was you, but one of you had like a martial arts master. Maybe it was Jay or something like that. A martial arts master who had like a terrible secret, but like he was looking for his mentor. And there was some vaulting story arcs that I thought were just brilliant, and I loved it. And so I definitely admire pulp. It's not one of my top 5, but I sort of like respect it through you, and I will, if you will. My number 2 is, though, you said it, and I was almost jumping out of my seat because it's the crime story. My number 2 is the Vegas 50s crime story.
Ah!
That's my number 2.
Wow!
My friend, it's higher than Middle Earth 2931, 2941, because I really I felt we had not only this is the reason why, and this is also why I chose what I chose for number 1. So I'm building to it. The reason why it began to bubble up even higher than 3 is because it's not just good for role playing. We could write fiction around. Like, you could really, if we had more time or maybe different career, I don't know what. Sometime, maybe when we're retired, Rob, we should write together, something like that. Because the stuff that we came up with, if you think about some of the story arcs and like the personalities, and then we really did some amazing character development. So the setting was great, right? We did Las Vegas in the 50s. One thing I appreciate about the setting was we also talked about the black community in the 1950s. We learned about their casinos. I had a character that was kind of, after I saw when I saw what is it, The Green Book. I kind of saw a little shade of my character in Viggo Mortensen's character a little bit there, where he's a white guy, but he understands and he can see like the pain of discrimination and things like that. Yeah. We actually role played that really well, I thought, with our group of friends. But we also, it's terribly portable. It's terribly portable because I flew in once. And we played with, we played with Paul. And like, Paul got way into it, and Paul dug deep.
Yes.
He dug deep for his character. You dug deep for your NPCs. I dug deep for Lieutenant, Sullivan. And so I still think to this day, and this is how something's really, really sticks with you as a genre, and a game, sure. And again, it's a fate game, but something sticks with your genre if you find yourself randomly imagining it, and there's no hope of you. You're not going to play next Sunday. I find myself thinking about the Vegas 50s games, when I'm in my car driving, see my friend, at random time, grocery store, I'll think about Lieutenant Sullivan, So you and I, by the way, had this amazing talk once when I was visiting you in Philadelphia. We went to walk down over by a park. It's the park not too far from your house, and we talked about the entire backstory of how my character shook hands with the mob in New York, and how he was kind of semi-banished out to Vegas to prove himself. We had this whole arc with the infamous gangster Donnie Del Vecchio, and even to this day, I find myself wanting to develop that story. I think to myself, well, this is really good because if I think I could write about it, and I think I can do more with just plain up like fiction writing, and that would satisfy me, then you've got a damn good genre.
Wow.
So it was really interesting that you said that earlier. I was like, crime story. Wait till he gets to number 2 for me, because I'm gonna totally bust it on him. But no, the 1950s crime story was something that, and you remember this also. We did a session when we were with your friend John and Michelle and Jay.
Yeah.
And we just did that. We did that. We did a weekend of And again, it was at a time when I was my mental health wasn't great, but I came out to see you and I was like, frick, I need this. I needed a whole 3 days of gaming. And P.S., we were mentally exhausted at the end of that. But it was we started 8 a.m. We went to 8 p.m. Took a break. 2 o'clock in the morning, we're still role playing. It was nuts. I tell this story to everybody, and one of the 3 stories was the 1950s game, the crime story.
I am flabbergasted. I am, first of all, I don't know if I'm more flabbergasted than honored, or more honored than flabbergasted that the 1960s crime story game exceeded in the list Lord of the Rings for you.
Yeah.
Because I know that's amazing. Well, okay, so let me just say a few things about the 1960s crime story. So, and I understand why you call it the 1950s crime story, because it does have it does have a 1950s feel. And so I created this game with Michelle. This was the brainchild of both of us. We had years ago said we should collaborate, and we did. We sort of round robin GM'd it, and I remember one of the questions Michelle asked me was, well, what specific year does it take place? And I was like, no. Let's not worry about that. Let's just say it's
that's good.
Let's just say it's 1960. And she was like, well, fine, but at least I need to know, was it before the Kennedy assassination or after the Kennedy assassination? Because the Kennedy assassination was a watershed event that changed the culture. And the 1960s before the Kennedy assassination feel more like the 50s. And the 1960s after the Kennedy assassination feel more like the early 70s. So which one is it? And I was like, all right, well, fair enough. And I said, well, you know what? Let's pull from the tropes of both. But because it was set in Las Vegas, it leaned more towards early 60s in feel, because you had like the Dapper Dons, and they were more traditional, and it was sort of like that. So that's that. God, there was so much I wanted to say. Well, Paul is going to be thrilled that you named this number 2, because he is absolutely chomping at the bit to play this game again with you. And it's all he ever talks about. It's like, I can't wait till Phil comes to Philadelphia again so we can play the Crime Story game. Like, he loves that game. And and absolutely consider it done. I mean, someday let's definitely collaborate on writing. But one of the things that I think is funny is, every game I do, and this is partially because I'm getting older and my memory is not what it used to be. Sure. I always sit down between the session that I just ran and the next session, and I write a 3-paragraph summary. No more than 3 paragraphs, no less than 3 paragraphs. And it summarizes everything. I try to pack it into 3 paragraphs so that the next time I sit down to run it, I know what happened. Because if I don't do that, I won't remember. But so smart. I make an exception for the Vegas game, because what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, number 1.
That's a great meta rule.
and number 2, anything that happens in Vegas is always done in sort of a half intoxicated fog, and you're not supposed to really remember it anyway. So what I did was, and I'm saying this for the benefit of the listeners, because I do this, because you actually helped me with the graphics. I created an 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of paper that has the graphic of a cocktail napkin with an alcohol soaked ring on it, on a marble bar, on a black marble bar, a white cocktail napkin. And what I do is I handwrite in pen what happened in the session on the cocktail napkin. And I can't go beyond the borders of the cocktail napkin. So it's going to be freaking awesome. So that's what I use to remember what happened the last time. God. And to the extent that I don't remember details, well, like, to hell with it, because that's the point. You're not supposed to. Right. You're not supposed to remember the details, and if you do, you're not supposed to go into the details.
Talk about the details. Right. Hey, we don't talk about it. Did you know the first thing or the second thing or the first thing? Right. Right.
So
that's awesome.
So I hope
like meta technique.
It's a great. But I hope you have a good memory of what we do in those sessions, because if we're going to someday sit down and write, all right, well then good. That gives us license to sort of edit a lot.
What was fun though, that actually is an awesome story. So because we can teleport that right into a later session where we talked about doing GM tricks and GM tips. That's a really great we can port that right over. But
let's port that right in.
But I think some of the fun of this also is group memory of a thing, and then you get some recall. Yeah. But even if you don't quite recall it, maybe the thing that you decide on maybe that was the way it was always anyway. So think back to my story about Donnie Del Vecchio and where Lieutenant Sullivan had come from, and how he was a crooked cop. I don't remember all those details, but I remember the main parts that make me go, that's a great character.
Yeah.
And as long as you can stay on that, who in a way cares what we say?
Right.
If it's not written down on now I'm going to use a cocktail napkin. This is really great. If it's not written down on that, it's not canon anyway. And who cares if it's a good story? So when I come to role play, and I will, again with Paul, I mean, like, we got to do it for Paul, man, at the very least. But maybe Paul won't understand every aspect of his character. And I remember a couple of cool scenes from when we played in Paul's basement. But maybe we won't remember it all, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's
And
okay.
maybe Sully will go, "Hey, who are you again?" And like, "Oh, are you that one guy?" And then we'll just pick up from there. I mean, why
Yeah,
couldn't we do that in game too? So
yeah, absolutely.
that's great. That's
That's
so
great. And
that's so cool.
one last thing I
That's so
wanted to say.
cool.
One last thing I wanted to say about the 1960s crime story game is there is a Netflix series called The Get Down, and it takes place. The Get Down. It's quite good, and it takes place. It's a 2016 drama, and I think there's only one season of it, but it takes place in the 1970s, and it takes place in the Bronx, New York. And it's like a predominantly African American and Hispanic / Latino cast, and it is about how the rap scene came to be, the rap scene in the 80s, how that came to be from the 1970s. And so the Crime Story game originally, before, well, when we played with Jason and Michelle and Jonathan, like the Queens group, when we played with them the Crime Story game, I think the martial arts character you're thinking of was Jason's Crime Story character. He wasn't a martial artist. What he was he was a Chinese Tong gangster who was sent over from China to oversee the Tong's interests in the United States, specifically in Las Vegas. And my version of the Crime Story game, because as I said, I round robined it with Michelle. So when I was running it, what I was aiming towards was in the 1960s there wasn't yet a Chinatown in Las Vegas, but by the 1970s there was. So I was taking a page from the Netflix series The Get Down, and I was telling the story of how the Chinatown, the respectable Chinatown of the 1970s, Las Vegas, came to be through Jason's character and his associates and his dealings.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, also think about like what you learn together too. I never knew that stuff, but now I know that stuff. It's like a history class in a way through the game. I mean, Ars Magica does that, you know that, because you have to research a part of the world and a time period. But like that's a wonderful thing, and this is somebody motivated to learn it all is awesome.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why I love role playing with Paul, because not only the 60s Crime Story game, but many of the settings that Paul recommends for our games are historical settings, and he is an historian. Like that's his college degree. So he'll pick a genre, and even if I don't know the historical setting, he'll pick like a historical fiction genre. And even if I'm not intimately familiar with the historical setting, and I'm never as intimately familiar as Paul is, I go, okay, I'll run that for you, because that forces me to sit down, research, and learn it. And I'm learning real history, and it's great. And I love that. Beautiful. Yeah, so, damn, maybe I should have made historical fiction. Well, you know what? I'll put that in the honorable mentions, historical fiction. All right.
Right.
All right. So that's your number 2. Yeah, all right.
That's my number 2, so you're number 1.
All right. I think if you were to guess it, this time you'll guess it correctly. Go ahead. You guess my number 1. What is it?
Your number 1. I'm sorry, I would have said Pulp for number 1, but you already said that.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'll tell you.
Star Wars. Is it Star Wars?
It is Star Wars. You got it.
I thought so. Okay.
It's Star Wars. Yeah, I did.
What specifically about Star Wars? Yeah.
Okay. Good. So what I love. All right. Like this is a very niche setting, right? It's like a particular franchise, and all right, fine. But what I love about the Star Wars franchise setting is that it is a mix of all of the things I love. It's not science fiction. It's space fantasy, and what space fantasy is sword and sorcery in outer space, which is sword and sorcery is my number 5, science fiction is my number 3, outer space is my number 2.
Together they mix it.
And the third ingredient in the mix is the daring do of pulp, two-fisted pulp.
You get it all.
You get it all with Star Wars.
That's true.
And the best part, well, not the best part, but one of the other things I really love about Star Wars is, by now, I mean, even before it was sold to Disney, even when it was still George Lucas's property, by now, there is an expanded universe novel or comic or game or this or that or role play stuff or blah 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 that pulls into the Star Wars universe every other single genre you can imagine. So there's the early Han Solo novels were pure science fiction. There were a bunch of novels that took place during the Clone Wars that were released during when the prequel films were released, and one of them is like a detective noir setting, but it's in the Star Wars universe. And there's pure sword and sorcery. They pull so many things into the Star Wars universe that you really can tell a Star Wars story and still flex the muscles of many other genres. That's one of the things I love about Star Wars.
That's really great. That's a really great theory too. I mean, that really great breakdown too. You get so much within Star Wars. It's hard not to like something in there too. You know. Yeah, and for your money there, I agree. Star Wars is not my number one, but and my number one may shock you. It shocked me when I thought about it. But Star Wars, I would say for me, space opera then should have made the list for the reasons your reasons are very compelling, my friend. But for my money, I do remember thinking of different things with my friends, like my friend Dave, my friend Rob, Nate, who was our GM in college I told you about. I remember thinking, let's do something that isn't so good guy, bad guy, which at the time we role played, we only had through the 3 films, right, all the way through Jedi, but we only had the 3 films to go on and a bunch of source books. And the idea of good versus evil is a powerful trope, but it's our only trope. We wanted to start playing. What about areas of moral ambiguity? What if we did like mercenaries and smugglers, and you had to make some of those like kind of the same kind of moral decisions that Captain Mal in Firefly, has to make. And he's a good guy, but he's got to pay for fuel too. So we ended up doing that, and I think you're right. It does lend itself to those different sub-genres, but within Star Wars. And as you were talking, I was thinking about how much I'm enjoying the series Andor right now, because you get a look at Cassian Andor and his less than noble, background, and he's also forced to make some choices. And the alliance is so nascent that they're actually rebel scum in a way, but they are hearts of gold. So, totally agree. Now I feel bad about not putting space opera on my list, but then again, that's okay.
we could say it's in your honorable mentions. That's all right.
Maybe it's a 3.5. Yeah. Right. My number one, for the reasons above about the portability to literature, is steampunk. So steampunk for me has been really big, and I've written in the steampunk. I've done some fiction writing in steampunk. I have some steampunk clothes, and I'm not a cosplayer.
And you're a published author in steampunk, and I bought your books.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am in a couple of different. I did a couple of short stories, and I've been to a few steampunk conventions where having some of the clothes was rather necessary. And I did some author readings, and I met some other great authors at the time, and I only ever kind of moonlit as a fantasy author, but the steampunk, a genre to me, is highly portable. It's highly, it's very multivaried in some of the things you can do with it. But I also respect it because I enjoy it's actually a version of real world. Some time period in real world. It's the Victorian age, but not really how it was, but kind of how we always want it to be with, maybe the difference engine and steam-powered robots and automatons and things like that, and airships. And what I find about steampunk is it is a translatable arc of vision among many people, many of whom aren't role players at all and haven't even played a board game, much less a role-playing game. I met a lot of people who and I got a great story for you, but I met a lot of people who are like vendors of clothing, or they're makers of something. It brings them together. I've met people at conventions who they just love the clothes. They like we love to make ourselves like a fantasy name. A lot of the people who enjoy the Society for Creative Anachronism or SCA would gotta get into the same idea because they love the clothes, they love playing a character, but it's a real life. They're almost LARPing in real life kind of thing. But I've also met people who consider themselves part of an airship. I've met actually several airship crews.
Whoa.
And the airship crews, I actually did a whole series of artwork for them. I actually contributed like 5 or 6 different airship crews for a convention a few years ago. And they loved my art, and it was a fun way to like bring like my short stories together with like Photoshop and stuff that work I had done. And I did like 11 by 17 posters for them. And the fun part was they weren't role playing, but they felt that they were on the same crew and they were just a group of friends. But what united them in their friendship was their shared almost real life role playing of being on this airship. So for me, when you get to that level, that to me is an extremely strong genre whose power cannot be denied.
Yeah.
If you want to role play in it, that's great. But that's only one of several things you can do, right? Which is kind of fun to think about, you know? Yeah. So, and if I walk down the street with a heavy blaster from Star Wars, it's probably not the right time period to do that in U.S. history, right? I wouldn't do that. But I can walk down with a top hat and go, and I've often walked around with a top hat, but oh, dude, that's so cool. You just wear a top hat? I'm like, I sure do, sir. You know, that was fun. So I put steampunk because that to me is like a pinnacle of genres.
That's a marvelous genre to put as your number one, and right here behind me on my most accessible of bookshelves, I have a really excellent The Extraordinary Tales of Victorian Futurism, Steampunk, and it's an anthology of steampunk stories. I highly recommend it to listeners if you like steampunk. And not only are the stories really great in the anthology, the book itself is just gorgeous.
Isn't it gorgeous? Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Think about the infusion of art and writing. I mean, can you think of anything better? I mean,
no, I can't think of anything better. And you know, the Victorian era, they didn't leave a single piece of space untouched by a pen stroke or anything. So in the artwork, in the illumination, just the book is beautiful. Yeah. So I highly recommend it if anyone likes steampunk. And I remember with a gaming group, you met them, Don. You gamed with them, Don, and his group in West Philadelphia. One time we were looking for a game to play, and it came down to pulp and steampunk, and we couldn't decide between the two. So someone said, "Why don't we mix them and call it steam pulp?" And we were like, that's pretty cool. So like it's a steam, it's a Victorian, it's steam futurism. Like steam it went on to become the predominant technology, but we're not in the Victorian era anymore. We're now in the Edwardian era, like the 20s, the 30s. And they're like, yeah, that's exactly right. And I was like, that's really cool. So we did that, and that was kind of a fun hybrid.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Dude, this was so much fun that we doubled the time we usually take.
Yeah. This counts as 2.
This counts as 2. So
we needed that much time though to really pick apart what we love about the genres, because those genres are huge things themselves. So
absolutely. And we mentioned earlier, you talked about the topic that we might do in the future. How do you prep for GMing? So why don't we plan on doing that in our next episode? What do you think?
That sounds like a wonderful deal. I cannot wait until we start covering that too, because man, we have that's a whole nother toy box of stuff, my friend. Yeah. I cannot wait. So it's always a pleasure to talk to you and do the stuff we're doing, because it's like I'm living it all over again, my friend.
Yeah.
So great to talk to you, and until next time.
Till next time.
Of gaming. Woo!
Woo!
All right.